We've all had them, those incredible aha moments where everything just suddenly makes sense. But why do they so often just fizzle out? Why don't they lead to real, lasting change? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive deep into the architecture of our minds to figure out why insight on its own just isn't enough.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever had that experience, that moment of pure, perfect clarity about a pattern in your life? You think, I get it now. This is it. It feels like a total breakthrough. And then, a week later, you're doing the exact same thing again. It's an incredibly frustrating cycle. And trust me, you are definitely not the only one who goes through it.
All right, so let's really get into this cycle of clarity and, well, collapse. The most important thing to get right off the bat is that this is not a personal failure. This isn't about you lacking willpower or not being smart enough. Nope. This is about the fundamental structure of how our minds are built.
I mean, think about it. We do the work, right? We reflect, we connect the dots, and then bam, we see it. And that feeling of progress is totally real. But then, when our behavior doesn't follow suit, we immediately start blaming ourselves. But what if it's not a failure of willpower at all? What if it's just a big misunderstanding of what that aha moment actually is?
So, from a structural point of view, what is an aha moment? See, we tend to think of it as this total renovation of our brain, but it's not. It's much more like flipping on a light switch in a dark room. For a moment, you see everything clearly, but you haven't actually rewired the house. So let's get a little technical for a second, but stick with me. Insight is basically a temporary local increase in coherence. All that really means is that for a brief moment, things just make sense. The mental static dies down, and a pattern becomes crystal clear. But the most crucial part of that definition is at the end. It happens within an otherwise unchanged cognitive architecture. In other words, the underlying wiring of your brain, it hasn't changed one bit. A good way to think about it is this. Insight is like a firework. It's powerful, it's dramatic, it's totally revelatory, and then it's gone. Real structural change, on the other hand, is like planting a tree. It's quiet, it's gradual, and you're building something new, something durable that's gonna last. One is an amazing feeling, the other is a new function. Okay, so this brings us to the big question. Why do we snap back to the old ways? The answer is brutally simple. Life happens. We call this load. It's the stress of a big deadline at work, the tension of a family argument, the general anxiety of just being a person. When that load hits our system, our brain does what it's designed to do. It takes the path of least resistance, which is always the old, established wiring. So here's exactly how that cycle plays out. First, some kind of familiar stressor pops up. Immediately, your brain defaults to those old, super worn pathways it has used a million times before to cope. The whole system just reverts to its baseline configuration, its factory settings. And that powerful, life-changing aha moment, it's not an active mechanism anymore. It's just a memory of a feeling you once had. And this experience, it's just so frustrating, isn't it? It creates this deep internal conflict where you feel like you're failing over and over. You know the answer, you can see the pattern perfectly, but you just can't seem to make the change stick. And this usually leads to a nasty cycle of self-blame, which, ironically, it just adds even more load to the system. Okay, so here's where we make the big pivot. What if insight was never meant to be the solution in the first place? What if we've been using this incredible tool for the completely wrong purpose? The key here is to reframe insight. It's not the cure, it's a diagnostic signal. It's not the destination, it's the map that shows you exactly where you need to go. And really, if you take one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this. You are not failing. The problem isn't you. It's that your current internal wiring, your architecture, it just can't support the change you're trying to make, yet. You don't need more willpower, you need better internal scaffolding. So this means your aha moment is still incredibly valuable. Think of it like a flashing check engine light on your car's dashboard. It's pointing you to the exact problem. It's telling you precisely where your system is getting overloaded, where your sense of self feels trapped or constrained, and what new capacities you're going to need to build to finally move forward. So if insight is just the map, what's the actual journey? It's the slow, quiet, and honestly often undramatic work of building a new cognitive architecture. It's about intentionally and patiently laying down new pipes, not just noticing that the old ones are leaky. We love to chase that revelatory feeling of insight because, let's face it, it feels amazing, it's exciting. But real, durable transformation, that comes from the quiet, persistent, day in, day out process of capacity building.
It's definitely less glamorous, but it's the only thing that actually creates change that lasts.
Because at the end of the day, just seeing the problem isn't even close to the same thing as solving it. Lasting change requires building. This means things like actively learning to regulate the load in your life, practicing new responses in low-stakes situations, and creating an internal environment where it actually feels safe enough to try something new.
So let's bring this all home. The whole game is about shifting our focus. We need to stop chasing the next aha moment and start taking deliberate architectural action. Let this be your new mantra, your new way of thinking about this. Your insight is your compass. It points you in the right direction. But it's your architecture, the ship you've actually built, that determines whether you can survive the journey and actually reach that destination. So from now on, remember this. An aha moment can absolutely show you the door to a new way of being, but insight alone doesn't give you the capacity to walk through it. That comes from the slow, steady, and vital work of building an internal architecture that can truly support the person you want to become. Thanks so much for watching.